James, I should begin by asking about the Pope.
Sure.
Do you think, do you know or any reason to believe that the publication of the Blood Gospel has had a hand in the resignation of the Pope?
I'm sure it does. The secrets that are revealed in this novel, I'm sure, require the Pope to step down.
It's just, I mean, the timing is kind of delicious. And I'm going to jump ahead, actually, and just ask, just to briefly introduce the Blood Gospel. How do we kick off?
Well, the story deals with a female archaeologist who was raised by a cult and sort of lost her faith. In the beginning of this novel, there is a earthquake at Masada in Israel. It splits the mountain, kills many people, and it reveals a tomb at the heart of the mountain where there's a mummified girl crucified on a cross. This female archaeologist is paired up with a Vatican researcher, also a military professional, and they go to investigate this tomb. There is an attack that occurs at that moment that thrusts them into this great big epic adventure, revealing the past that blends vampire mythology with Catholic mythology.
When you bring in the world of explicit monsters,
Right.
vampires, was that making that step, did it feel very, organic to the story of the Blood Gospel as you were conceiving it, or was there any trepidation of, oh, am I going to, is this overstepping my usual world?
My main novels, Sigma novels, usually have a historical mystery that I try to solve within the pages of that novel, and also a bit of science that makes me go, what if, that I explore the fringes of. And so in this case, it's instead of taking science and exploring the fringes of that science, here I'm just taking some of the mythology of vampirism and exploring the fringes of that. Is there a scientific basis for vampirism? If vampires did exist, how might have Christ dealt with them in the past? How might that have changed history? And as we roll history forward to the present day, how might the Catholic Church look today? And that became sort of the crux of the story. And so it does have science, does have history, does have adventure, does have a military hero, has people with big guns. No sparkly vampires in my novels, by the way. The only ones that sparkle is just those that he happens to blow up with phosphorus grenades. But otherwise, the book is dedicated to Anne Rice, and so I was trying to return vampires to more of their gothic, conflicted, sort of dark side versus the sparkly vampire of the Twilight series.
What particularly interested me about the Blood Gospel was this creation of this marriage of two existing mythologies, vampirism and Christianity. And I read in a different interview where you were surprised to see how many links there are between these two mythologies.
There are. I mean, the origin of this book came out. I was at the LA County Museum of Art, and there was a Rembrandt's painting of the raising of Lazarus. Very dark, very gothic painting. And what was odd about that painting is, here is Rembrandt painting this miraculous act, this raising of Lazarus, the returning of Lazarus to his loved ones. But Rembrandt chose to paint the loved ones in this painting rather than with expressions of jubilation and an awe of this miracle. They're all painted with expressions of horror. And I thought, well, why did Rembrandt choose to paint these spectators with such horrific looks on their faces, as though something horrible is happening right there? And I talked to some art historians about that painting, and the more I started investigating it, there was sort of almost a vampiric sort of underpinnings to the raising of Lazarus. And the more I started looking at that mythology, the more I sort of became, saw that there's an odd pairing between some of the tropes of vampirism and some of the trappings of the Catholic Church. And they fold sort of very uniquely together. In this book, there's actually Vaticans that are in service to the vampires. Christ makes a pact with vampires where he says, as long as these vampires serve me, I will give them an option, I'll give them a path to salvation. They're not allowed to drink human blood anymore. They must only drink my blood. As long as these vampires only drink Christ's blood, they can survive. And so the act of transubstantiation, which is a Catholic belief that during the Mass, the wine turns into the actual physical blood of Christ. And so my Vatican vampires consume blessed wine. That's what they survive on, and it gives them certain benefits. They can walk in sunlight, but sunlight actually still does hurt them. And so they started wearing hooded robes to protect them somewhat from the sunlight during the day. And again, I echo that to the monks' robes, and why monks wear hooded robes is a sort of a reflection back, a dark mirror upon this secret history of vampires within the Catholic Church. The odd thing was the more I looked into that mythology, the more these things sort of began to blend together. It was almost as though somebody had known this story was going to be told. This was a story I knew, a big epic story that I probably didn't want to write by myself. As you can see, there's two names on this book. And I've known Rebecca Cantrell. She's an award-winning mystery writer. She writes mysteries set between World War I and World War II. the Hannah Vogel Mystery Series, and I'd first met her when I was teaching writing at the Maui Writers Conference. She was a student of mine at that point. I loved the way, with a few deft strokes of her pen, she's able to create these historical pieces of the world and these three-dimensional characters. So I thought, well, I know my wheelhouse as a writer. Not sure I can tell this epic vampiric Catholic story without maybe borrowing some of her skills. So I called her, just asked her if she'd be willing to join me on this venture, and she agreed. She liked the story idea. So we hopefully put both of our best foots forward.
You mentioned monsters, and there are, even in your real-world novels, there are always, they could often be mutations of science, but there's the monstrous recurs, and of course vampires are an entirely supernatural monster. A, where does that fascination with monsters come for you, and B, where do you go to summon the descriptions or to create the monsters of your novels?
My undergraduate degree was in evolutionary biology, so I've always liked the idea of where might evolution take different species. So as a veterinarian, I just love playing. Basically I get my own piece of Play-Doh, and I can just craft whatever type of creature I want. So again, in my Sigma novels, a lot of times it's science that's creating these alternate creatures, or in this case, it's sort of an offshoot of vampirism. How come there's wolves tied to the history of vampire? Why bats are tied to the history of vampire? You're going to find out in the Blood Gospel how those things actually tie together.
Do you test, once you have that, not a page has been written, but you have that concept, do you have an audience for just pitching and testing that idea, or do you just know it yourself?
When it comes to the idea, the concept, I'm pretty guarded about that. Usually that's my own little sandbox I play with privately. I'll spend about 90 days sort of workshopping an idea where I'm doing the research on the locations of that book, the history of that book, the science of that book, and getting that skeletal outline. But I like to research, probably to a fault, so I make a commitment to myself. On the 91st day, I have to actually start putting words on paper. Otherwise, I'll keep researching and researching, thinking I'm working, but by that point, it's playing. It's time to get to work on that 91st day.
Okay, I just want to ask about this. Talking about, it's quite a difference between talking about a book and writing it and conceiving it. I guess first question, which do you prefer? And B, even if it is the latter, the work is preferable over the talking about the book. To what extent or degree do you enjoy meeting readers? Because you have many, and is it something that you take pleasure in and even learn something from?
It's definitely a different world. I mean, even when I started writing, my first book was published in '99, and even back then, very few writers had websites. So it was a fairly solitary profession, and I like that. I get to be in my own little office and dream up these fantastic places and live in my own head for a bit, and I can play hero and villain depending upon the day. So I really enjoy that. But it's also very solitary, and it was very limiting. But as the social media began to expand with Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and all the others, it allows you to have that intimacy of a relationship with your reader that we never had before. And I do enjoy that. A lot of my ideas now that end up in that box have come from people that have sent me notes on Twitter or on Facebook or by email. And you can have that ongoing relationship with readers that you never had before. A lot of my fans on Facebook and Twitter, I chat with them so regularly that I think of them as friends, and we never had that access before. So I really enjoy that a lot.